Warning: extremely disturbing material concerning grooming, CSA, coercion, and peril are discussed. Tate scowled, not sure what to say. This feels illegal, he muttered as they stopped outside another locked door. It isn't. That's exactly what somebody doing something illegal says. Dr. Klein ignored him and entered the security code into the keypad. The door unlocked with a soft click. Tate frowned slightly when he realized it led into a private bedroom. Not a patient room. Something else. The lighting was softer than the rest of the ward, with muted lamps instead of harsh fluorescent ceiling panels. There was a neatly made bed against the far wall, a small bookshelf beside it, and a single upholstered chair near the window. It looked almost ordinary compared to the sterile atmosphere outside. Tate stepped inside cautiously. Why am I in here? Dr. Klein closed the door behind them before sitting calmly in the chair near the wall. Tate, she said gently, I spoke with the warden earlier. That immediately made him suspicious. That sentence never leads anywhere good. To pass your 72-hour psychiatric hold, she continued evenly, you need to demonstrate emotional stability and behavioral control. Tate leaned against the wall, folding his arms loosely across his chest. Okay. I convinced the warden you would remain on your best behavior for the remainder of your stay. He blinked once. Congratulations on your optimism. Dr. Klein gave him a patient look. I'm serious. So am I. She sighed faintly before continuing. You have one more full day here after today. I'd prefer not to spend tomorrow's session discussing another impulsive incident involving hospital staff. Tate rubbed the back of his neck. You really are letting Mandy go? Yes, Dr. Klein replied calmly, because actions have consequences. That answer quieted him slightly. He looked around the room again, still confused. You still haven't explained why I'm here. Dr. Klein crossed one leg over the other in the chair. The room is soundproof, she explained. Patients occasionally use it during severe panic episodes, emotional dysregulation, or sensory overload. Tate narrowed his eyes slightly. You think I'm emotionally dysregulated? I think you're emotionally overstimulated. That sounds like therapist branding. It means your brain never shuts off. He opened his mouth to make another joke, but Dr. Klein continued before he could. You've spent the last several days trapped inside cycles of obsession, shame, longing, jealousy, impulsivity, and confinement. Tate looked away slightly after hearing Noah summarize it that way. You chase stimulation constantly, she continued gently. Conflict, desire, attention, seduction, emotional intensity. And sometimes people like you need stillness forced upon them before they can hear themselves think clearly. The room became quiet after that. Tate glanced back toward the door. So what exactly am I supposed to do in here? A soft knock tapped against the door exactly 3 hours later. Tate looked up from the bed slowly, disoriented from the strange silence he'd been sitting in for what felt like forever. The room had grown dimmer now, evening light replacing the afternoon sun through the narrow window. The door opened. Dr. Klein stood in the doorway, holding the handle loosely in one hand. Well, she said calmly, the building is still standing. Tate gave a tired smirk from the edge of the bed. Barely. Dr. Klein studied him for a second, as though quietly assessing whether the isolation had helped at all. You seem calmer. I'm emotionally transformed. I'm sure. She stepped slightly aside from the doorway then. I don't particularly care what you do in here for the next little while, she said evenly. You're welcome, by the way. Tate was confused. Dr. Klein smiled at Tate, studying him for a moment. I see potential in you, she said. And if you promise me that you'll make a real effort during tomorrow's session, I've decided that you need to mellow out a little. Tate raised an eyebrow. Mellow. Yes, you need a little happiness in your life. She gave him an amused look. I know that too much fluorescent lighting and psych ward food can do terrible things to a person's sense of humor. Tate couldn't help laughing. So, Dr. Klein continued, I'm prescribing you a little less brooding and a little more smiling. Is that an official medical diagnosis? Absolutely. Tate shook his head, still grinning. You're a strange doctor. And you, Dr. Klein replied, are exactly why I need to keep working on that sense of humor. Tate frowned slightly, confused by the wording. Then he saw movement behind her in the hallway, and immediately sat upright. Noah stepped uncertainly into the room. The door shut behind him with a soft mechanical click. For one stunned second, Tate genuinely thought he might be hallucinating. Noah looked exhausted. His blonde hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it all day, and there were dark shadows beneath his eyes that hadn't been there weeks ago. He wore a gray hoodie beneath a denim jacket, shoulders tense the moment the lock engaged behind him. Tate stared at him in disbelief, then used his hands to comb his hair while trying to look his best. Noah. Noah looked just as overwhelmed seeing him. Hi. Tate stood up immediately from the bed. What are you doing here? Noah glanced briefly toward the closed door before looking back at him. Dr. Klein contacted me. That caught Tate completely off guard. She what? Noah shifted awkwardly near the wall. She said you were having a hard time. Tate blinked slowly as realization settled into place. The soundproof room. The privacy. The 3 hours. The timing. Tate almost laughed aloud. That manipulative genius, he muttered under his breath. Noah frowned slightly. What? Tate rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly understanding everything. Dr. Klein thinks if she locks me in a room with you for a few hours, I'll behave during tomorrow's session. Noah looked horrified. Wait, is that why she brought me here? Probably, Tate smirked faintly despite himself. She figured sex would emotionally sedate me. Noah's face immediately turned pink. Tate. What? You cannot say things like that so casually. I'm literally in a psychiatric facility. My social filter died days ago. Despite himself, Noah laughed quietly. The sound hit Tate harder emotionally than expected. Because it had been days since he'd heard Noah laugh. Real laugh. Not a polite conversation, not tense arguing, just Noah sounding like himself again. The silence afterward turned softer. Tate studied him carefully now. You weren't supposed to be allowed here. Noah looked down briefly. I know. You were on the no-visit list. I know that too. Then why are you here? Noah hesitated. Then quietly. Because I wanted to see you. That answer knocked most of the humor out of Tate instantly. The room felt smaller suddenly. Tate stepped a little closer, carefully watching Noah's body language the way he always did. Noah looked nervous, emotionally guarded, but he hadn't stepped back toward the door either. You came all the way here voluntarily? Tate asked softly. Don't sound so shocked. I am shocked. Noah folded his arms tightly across himself. Dr. Klein called yesterday. And she said you were emotionally overwhelmed. That sounds nice. Noah looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. She also said that the staff mentioned you wouldn't stop talking about me. Tate immediately looked offended. That feels violating somehow. It's literally therapy. Still. Noah's expression softened despite himself. She didn't tell me details. Good. She just said, Noah hesitated again. She said both of us were avoiding conversations that probably needed to happen. That sounded exactly like Dr. Klein. Tate exhaled quietly through his nose. Yeah, that sounds like her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then Noah glanced around the room awkwardly. So, this is where they put you when you emotionally terrorize the staff. Tate groaned. You heard about Mandy. The entire facility probably heard about Mandy. It sounds worse than it was. Noah raised an eyebrow immediately. Does it? Tate rubbed his face. Okay, maybe not. Noah shook his head faintly, though there was tired amusement underneath it. You've been here like 5 minutes and already caused an HR incident. I'm committed to making impressions. I needed to get my rocks off, and she consented before that mood killer yelled at us. That is not a good quality. Tate smiled despite himself. You still came. That quieted Noah again. The air between them shifted after that sentence. More vulnerable now. Noah walked farther into the room slowly before sitting down near the edge of the bed. Tate stayed standing for another moment before eventually sitting beside him, careful not to crowd him immediately. For a while neither of them spoke. Then Noah finally asked quietly, "Are you okay?" The question hit harder than Tate expected. Because Noah sounded sincere. Not angry. Not defensive. Just worried. Tate looked down at his hands, honestly. "Yes," Noah asked. "No." Noah stayed quiet beside him. Tate laughed weakly under his breath afterward. Dr. Klein would probably be proud of that answer. "She seems intense. She's terrifying, Noah." Noah smiled faintly. "She called me emotionally avoidant within like 4 minutes." Tate looked genuinely delighted. "Oh my God, she diagnosed you recreationally too. She said I confuse safety with happiness." Tate's smile faded slightly after hearing that. Noah noticed immediately. "She talks about you a lot differently than you think she does," Noah admitted quietly. Tate frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "She doesn't think you're a hopeless crazy case." "I never said she did." "You act like everybody secretly sees you as some manipulative disaster." Tate looked away after that. Noah's voice softened. "She actually seemed worried about you." That unsettled Tate more than criticism probably would have. The silence stretched again. Then Noah muttered quietly, "You really scared me, you know." Tate looked back at him immediately, "With Mandy." "With all of this?" Noah gestured vaguely toward the facility around them. "You're disappearing, getting admitted, the phone calls, the fighting." Tate swallowed hard. "I know. You make everything feel like life or death sometimes. Not everything is a crisis, Tate." That sounded painfully similar to Dr. Klein. Tate leaned back slightly against the wall behind the bed. "I don't know how to stop doing that. Tate, we need to talk about why you didn't let me." The words died in his throat as Tate launched himself more onto the bed. The larger man's body slammed into Noah's, driving him backward. Noah's feet tangled and he crashed backwards onto the queen-sized mattress with Tate on top of him. "I don't want to talk anymore," Tate growled, his hands already roaming. "Hey, wait a moment." But Tate's mouth cut off any protest. He kissed Noah hard. "You okay?" Tate asked. Noah nodded. Tate and Noah have sex in the holding cell in the psych ward. Scene retracted, read extended version on Wattpad. "Tell me something," Tate murmured. "What?" "Tell me your mind." "I'm Riley's Tate, always have been." Tate was angry that Noah belonged to another man. The overhead lights had been lowered for the night, leaving only the pale glow from the hallway slipping through the narrow observation window in the door. Noah being there somehow made the room feel human again. Tate slowly pulled Noah closer until Noah's head rested against his bare chest. His fingers immediately found Noah's blonde hair, combing through the wet, soft strands with familiar affection. Tate had always loved Noah's hair. Even as a teenager, touching it calmed him in ways nothing else ever could. "I missed you," Tate whispered. Noah stayed quiet, listening to the steady thump of Tate's heartbeat beneath his ear. Tate exhaled shakily before speaking again. "I'm sorry I took your name off the visitors list." His hand slowed slightly in Noah's hair. "I just hate when you see me like this." Noah tilted his head enough to look up at him. Tate looked exhausted tonight, not physically exhausted, emotionally. His eyes carried the bruised heaviness of someone trying desperately to hold himself together. "You don't have to hide from me," Noah said softly. Tate gave a faint smile at that, though it looked sad around the edges. "Maybe I do." His thumb brushed against Noah's shoulder underneath the blanket. "You've always seen too much of me." Noah lay his head back down against Tate's chest. Tate tightened his arms around him instinctively, almost protectively. "I want you to know something," Tate said after a long silence. "What?" Tate swallowed before answering. "I want more with you than just sex." Noah's breathing slowed. Tate continued stroking his hair carefully, thoughtfully. "Even though you are the most attractive person I've ever had in my bed," he laughed softly under his breath. "God, Noah, you don't even realize what you do to me." Noah felt warmth crawl into his face. "But that's not all I want," Tate clarified quietly. "I don't want this to just be physical every time we find each other again." His voice lowered. "I want us to bond emotionally, too." The confession sat heavily between them. Tate leaned down and pressed a slow kiss against Noah's forehead, lingering there for a moment before settling back against the pillows. Noah could hear Tate's heartbeat calming again, steadier now that the words were finally out. For a while neither of them spoke. The psych ward around them remained eerily quiet except for distant footsteps beyond the locked hallway doors and the occasional buzz from fluorescent lights. Noah wondered how many nights Tate had spent alone in this room replaying every mistake between them. Tate held Noah closer suddenly, almost like instinct. "When I get out tomorrow," Tate started carefully, "would you pick me up?" There was something vulnerable in the question, hopeful even. Noah hesitated. Tate noticed immediately. "No," Noah admitted quietly, "I can't." The atmosphere shifted at once. Tate's fingers paused in Noah's hair. "Riley and I are going tomorrow to pick out cutlery, kitchen supplies for our new house." The words landed like a knife dragged slowly across skin. Noah felt Tate's chest tense underneath him before Tate even spoke. The heartbeat beneath Noah's ear immediately changed rhythm, faster now, heavier, harder. Noah could physically hear the blood pressure spike inside Tate's body. Tate stared blankly toward the ceiling. "Your new house," he repeated softly. Noah nodded once against his chest. Tate's jaw flexed. "Right." Silence filled the room again, but this silence felt completely different from before, colder, strained. Noah could hear Tate trying to regulate his breathing. "You're really doing it then," Tate said eventually, "building a whole life with him." Noah sat up slightly to look at him. "Tate." "No, it's okay," Tate forced a smile that looked painful. "I asked." But Noah could still hear the rapid pounding inside Tate's chest. Tate looked away toward the small reinforced window in the psych ward door. Somewhere outside the room, a patient laughed loudly down the hallway before a nurse gently redirected them. The ward's normal sounds suddenly made Tate look deeply embarrassed again. "I hate this place," Tate muttered. "It's temporary, Tate. It's humiliating." Noah frowned. "Getting help isn't humiliating." Tate looked back at him then, eyes sharp with emotion. "Do you know what's humiliating?" His voice cracked slightly. "Having the person you love hear your heart start racing because they mentioned another man." Noah froze. Tate immediately regretted saying it. Noah could see it on his face. Tate rubbed a hand over his eyes tiredly. "Forget I said that." "No." Tate stayed silent. "You love me?" Noah asked quietly. Tate laughed once under his breath, hollow and defeated. "You're just figuring that out now." Noah didn't know what to say. Tate looked down at him again, softer this time, devastated but softer. "I've loved you for years, Noah." His fingers returned carefully to Noah's hair again like he couldn't help himself. "That's the problem." The confession made Noah's chest ache. Tate continued staring at him with exhausted honesty. "I know you're engaged. I know Riley probably gives you stability and peace and all the things I can't consistently give you right now." His eyes drifted around the psych ward room bitterly. "Especially not from in here. You don't know what Riley gives me." "No," Tate admitted, "but I know what I saw tonight." Noah's throat tightened. "You came here," Tate whispered. "You slept with me, you curled up on my chest like this is where you still belong." His hand trembled slightly where it rested against Noah's shoulder. "Then you told me tomorrow you're going shopping for your future with someone else." Noah looked down guiltily. Tate immediately softened again at the sight. "God," he sighed shakily, "I don't want you feeling guilty either. Then stop making me feel like I'm betraying you." Tate looked stunned by the sentence. After a long moment he asked quietly, "Aren't you?" The question hurt because Noah didn't fully know the answer. Tate could see that uncertainty all over his face. That realization seemed to break something inside him. His heartbeat sped up again beneath Noah's ear. "You know the sick part?" Tate whispered. "If you had told me tonight you were leaving Riley, I think I would have believed every terrible thing my brain says about us was suddenly worth it." Noah's eyes watered slightly. Tate reached up and wiped beneath one of Noah's eyes with his thumb gently. "I'm sorry," Tate murmured instantly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to push." "You're not pushing." "Yes, I am," Tate gave a weak smile. "I always do with you." Noah lay back down slowly against Tate's chest again. Tate immediately wrapped his arms around him tighter, almost relieved Noah hadn't pulled away. For several minutes they simply stayed there together on the queen-size bed inside the quiet psych ward room, holding onto each other like neither of them fully knew how to let go. Finally, Tate kissed the top of Noah's head softly. "When you're standing in some store tomorrow picking silverware with him," Tate whispered, "I'm still going to be thinking about this." He closed his eyes. "About you lying here with me pretending we still belong to each other." Noah slowly climbed off the queen-size bed, the mattress rising slightly as his weight left Tate's body. The sudden absence of him felt immediate, cold. Tate stayed against the pillows, silent now, watching Noah move around the psych wardroom, gathering the pieces of himself back together. The dim lighting cast soft shadows across Noah's bare shoulders as he bent down, searching for his clothes. His shirt had ended up half beneath the bedside chair. One of his socks was near the bathroom door. Tate's eyes followed every movement quietly, memorizing him the way people memorize things they know they are about to lose. Noah pulled on his shorts first, irritation already beginning to show in the sharper movements of his hands. The emotional heaviness in the room had shifted into something more dangerous now, resentment. Tate watched Noah look for his shoe beneath the side of the bed. "If I asked you," Tate said carefully, his voice low in the darkness, "to leave Riley and never look back, would you?" Noah froze. For a moment the room became completely still. Then Noah exhaled sharply through his nose and bent down again, grabbing his shoe. "That's not fair." Tate laughed softly at that, though the sound carried no happiness whatsoever. "Says the guy leaving my bed." Noah immediately straightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn this into something manipulative." Tate looked away toward the ceiling with a bitter smile. "Manipulative," he repeated the word quietly to himself like he was testing how it sounded. Noah shoved his foot into his shoe harder than necessary. "I chose a life," Noah said firmly. "Long before tonight." Tate's expression tightened slightly though he said nothing. "You don't get to wake up one day," Noah continued, voice growing sharper, "because suddenly you finally allowed yourself to feel something you've buried for 20 years and expect my entire world to rearrange around it." That one hit Tate directly. Noah saw it land too. But he kept going anyway. "I waited for you." Tate stayed silent. "For years," Noah snapped. "I waited for you to figure yourself out. I waited for you to stop ruining things every time they became real between us. I waited through the women, the disappearing acts, the emotional walls, the pretending." Noah grabbed his shirt off the floor angrily. "And eventually I gave up when you left me for Chloe." Tate lowered his eyes. "I moved on," Noah said. "I built something stable, something healthy, and now I'm happy." The word happy seemed to physically hurt Tate. Noah noticed the reaction immediately and looked away for a second, jaw tight. "Sometimes," Noah continued more quietly, "if you miss the boat, Tate, you have to live with that." The psych ward fell silent except for the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. Tate stared down at his hands. Noah pulled his shirt over his head aggressively before continuing. "I'm not rerouting my entire life because tonight scared you emotionally." His voice cracked with frustration now. "I already bought my ticket. I already chose where my life was going." Tate swallowed hard. "And honestly," Noah continued, anger finally boiling over fully now, "I think it's a little presumptuous of you to expect me to jump when you finally work through your shit." That made Tate look up immediately. "Presumptuous," he repeated quietly. "Yes." Noah shoved his other shoe on and stood up fully now, packing once across the room before turning back toward the bed. "You act like because we platonically loved each other once that means you automatically get access to me forever." Noah gestured toward Tate emotionally. "Like I'm supposed to stop everything because you finally decided you're ready." Tate's face hardened slightly now too. "That's not what I said." "It's absolutely what you implied." "Noah." "No," Noah shook his head sharply. "You don't get to lie there asking me to leave my fiancé after disappearing emotionally for years." "I didn't disappear because I stopped loving you." "Then why did you disappear?" Tate opened his mouth but nothing came out immediately. Noah laughed bitterly. "Exactly." Tate rubbed a tired hand across his face. "You think this is easy for me. I think you're used to me waiting." The sentence sliced clean through him. Tate's expression shifted instantly. Noah saw it happen but his anger had built too high now to stop. "You always assumed," Noah continued, voice trembling now from years of unresolved hurt, that eventually I'd still be here. He pointed toward himself. Still loving you, still available, still emotionally loyal to you while you figure yourself out at your own pace. That isn't fair. No, Noah snapped, then tell me I'm wrong. Tate couldn't. That silence became an answer all by itself. Noah shook his head slowly, hurt flashing across his face now beneath the anger. You know what the worst part is? Noah asked quietly. A part of me probably would have left everything for you years ago when I was in high school. Tate looked up immediately. But not now. Those 3 words devastated the room. Tate visibly stopped breathing for a second. Noah looked away first. I'm tired, Tate. His voice sounded smaller suddenly, sadder. I spent so much of my life emotionally orbiting around you. Noah laughed bitterly under his breath. Do you even understand what that does to somebody, loving someone who loves you back not in the same way and never actually chooses you? I would choose you now. And that's the problem, Noah pointed toward him again, now. Tate looked stricken. You waited until I finally learned how to live without you. The words echoed in the quiet room. Tate leaned back slowly against the pillows like Noah had physically hit him. Noah grabbed his jacket off the chair beside the bed. You know what Riley gives me? Noah asked suddenly. Tate didn't answer. He gives me peace? Noah's eyes watered slightly despite his anger. He gives me consistency. He calls when he says he'll call. He shows up when he promises he'll show up. He doesn't make me question whether I matter to him every 6 months. Tate shut his eyes briefly. And maybe that sounds boring compared to whatever this is between us, Noah admitted, gesturing emotionally between them, but I'm exhausted from confusing emotional intensity with love. That sentence lingered heavily. Tate stared at him silently for a long moment. Then finally quietly. Do you love him more than me? Noah's face immediately twisted with frustration. That's exactly the kind of question I mean. Answer it. No. Tate's jaw tightened slightly at the honesty. But I trust him more than you, Noah said. And that hurt even worse. Tate looked down instantly, his throat visibly tightening. Noah immediately regretted how hard the sentence landed, but he refused to take it back. The truth had lived between them too long already. Tate laughed softly again, though now it sounded hollow. So that's it, he murmured, the stable guy wins. No, Noah said tiredly, the guy who stayed touched my heart. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Tate stared toward the locked psych ward door, his eyes distant now. You know what's pathetic? Tate asked quietly after a while. Noah didn't respond. I still want you to stay the night once I'm back at my home. Noah closed his eyes briefly. Tate looked back at him then, heartbreak written all over his face. I know you're leaving, Tate whispered. I know tomorrow you're going to go buy forks and plates and stupid little domestic things with another man. His voice weakened slightly. But right now you're still here. Noah looked at him helplessly. Tate gave him one final sad smile. And apparently, he said quietly, I'm still stupid enough to take whatever pieces of you I can get. Noah shook his head slowly, breathing hard through his anger, unsure how he could possibly explain himself to Tate any clearer than he already had. His hands trembled slightly as he shoved the last of his belongings into place, frustration and hurt colliding violently inside him. Tate stayed sitting against the pillows on the queen-size bed, silent now, watching Noah pace around the psych bedroom like a storm barely contained. Finally Noah turned toward him again. You know what? Noah said sharply. If you were actually a gentleman the second you realized your feelings for me weren't platonic anymore, or whatever this twisted obsession love-lust thing you've got going on is, you would have kept your mouth shut. Tate flinched slightly. Noah kept going. You would have let me be happy. The room fell quiet again, except for Noah's uneven breathing. But you couldn't do that, could you? Noah laughed bitterly, dragging a hand through his hair. You couldn't just leave me alone and let me move on peacefully. You had to storm into my life again, into my house. His eyes narrowed. You attacked me emotionally and carnally the second you realized I wasn't emotionally waiting around for you anymore. That's not what happened. No, Noah snapped immediately. Then what exactly would you call grabbing me while I was kissing someone else and making me question everything I built? Tate's jaw tightened. Noah pointed toward him angrily. You made me second-guess a wonderful life. That sentence seemed to hit Tate hard. A stable life, Noah continued. A healthy life, a life where I wake up every morning actually knowing where I stand with someone. Tate looked away. But the second you realized I might genuinely belong to somebody else, suddenly your feelings mattered more than my peace. My feelings do matter, Tate said quietly. No, Noah shot back instantly, not more than my future. Tate went silent again. Noah laughed bitterly under his breath, packing once toward the door before turning back. You know what's unbelievable? He asked. I came here tonight to give you a piece of my mind. Tate looked back at him slowly. And instead, Noah said, voice cracking with disgust at himself, I gave you my body. The shame in his expression was immediate and raw. What kind of person does that? Noah muttered mostly to himself. Tate's face softened. Noah. No, Noah cut him off sharply, you don't get to comfort me right now. The fluorescent lights above them buzzed faintly in the tense silence. Noah shook his head again, struggling to regulate himself. Everything with you always becomes about your needs, he said finally. Tate frowned. That isn't true. It absolutely is true. Noah stepped closer to the bed now, anger burning visibly in his eyes. You think with your emotions and your privates, Tate, that's it. His voice rose. You wanted me physically tonight, you got me physically tonight, and the second that was over you immediately started emotionally clawing at me again. Tate's expression hardened slightly now too, hurt is beginning to turn defensive. That's unfair. No, unfair is me having to explain to my fiancé why some emotionally unstable stranger shoved him off me on my porch because he couldn't handle seeing me kissed by someone else. Tate physically recoiled at the word stranger. Noah saw it. But he was too angry to stop. Your feelings are inconvenient, Noah continued, selfish, presumptuous, his voice cracked with exhaustion, and honestly annoying. Tate stared at him silently, wounded beyond words now. Noah laughed again bitterly, though his eyes had started watering. You know what the worst part is? He asked. A part of me still feels guilty for saying that because I know you're hurting. He pointed around the psych wardroom angrily. You're in here falling apart mentally and somehow I'm still more worried about protecting your feelings than my own. Tate finally spoke again very quietly. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Noah snapped, because you did. That landed harder than anything else. Tate lowered his eyes immediately. For a second Noah almost softened. Almost. Then Tate whispered something that reignited everything. I just didn't want to lose you. Noah stared at him in disbelief. There, Noah said sharply, pointing toward him, that's exactly what I mean. He shook his head. Even now you still phrase everything in terms of what you want. Tate looked stunned. You don't want to lose me, Noah continued angrily. You don't want another man touching me, you don't want me building a life with someone else. His chest rose and fell harder now. Did you ever stop for 5 seconds and think about what I wanted? Tate opened his mouth, but Noah cut him off again. No, because you assumed I always emotionally belonged to you, no matter how many years passed. That isn't fair. It's true. The silence after that was suffocating. Noah grabbed his jacket aggressively from the chair beside the bed. I'm going home, he said coldly. Tate looked at him carefully now, like he knew something irreversible was happening between them. Noah shoved his arms through his sleeves. And I'm going to go to sleep beside my fiancé, Noah continued, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. Tate's face tightened visibly in intense jealousy. Because I'm in a relationship, Noah said firmly. A real one, which means I can be with that man if I want to be. Tate looked away sharply at that, jaw flexing hard. And if it bothers you that somebody else touches me, Noah finished, voice shaking with fury and heartbreak alike, then get the fuck over it. The sentence echoed violently through the psych ward room. For a second, neither of them moved. Tate sat frozen on the bed, staring downward like Noah had hollowed him out from the inside. Noah stood near the door, breathing hard, eyes glassy with emotion, and he refused to let himself fully feel. Then finally Noah turned away. For one brief second their eyes met again. Anger. Love. Regret. 24 years of unresolved devastation sit between them. Noah had already reached the door. His hand was on the handle, his breathing still uneven, his jacket half on his shoulders like he couldn't decide whether he was escaping or collapsing. The metal handle clicked loudly in the silence as he yanked the psych ward door open. Tate looked up instinctively at the sound. Then he stopped. Slowly he turned back around. Tate was still sitting on the queen-size bed in the psych ward room, frozen in place. He looked like he hadn't moved since Noah opened the door the first time. His face was pale now, stripped of defensiveness, stripped of anger, just raw shock and something close to grief. Noah stared at him for a long moment. The silence between them felt heavier than anything they'd said that night. Then Noah spoke. "I want a baby girl." Tate blinked once, confused. "What?" Noah swallowed hard, his voice shaking but steadying as he forced himself to continue. "I've always wanted a daughter," he said, "ever since I was a kid." Tate didn't move. Noah laughed once, but there was nothing humorous in it. "Do you know what I wanted to name her?" Tate's throat bobbed, he shook his head slowly. "No," Noah said, "of course you don't." He stepped further into the room again, like the anger was pulling him back in even as he tried to leave. "I've wanted to name my daughter Emily since I was 9 years old." The name landed in the room like something fragile being dropped. Tate flinched. Noah saw it and something inside him cracked whiter. "But I can't do that now," Noah said sharply, "thanks to you." Tate's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Noah. Do you think I'm going to name my daughter after a girl who wrecked my life?" Noah snapped suddenly, voice rising again. "After everything you turned into, after everything you made me feel." Tate's hands tightened slightly against the blanket. "I can't even hear that name the same way anymore," Noah continued, packing now, words spilling out faster and faster. "Let alone use it for someone I actually love." Tate looked like he wanted to interrupt, but he didn't. Noah kept going anyway. "You took my ability to trust my own feelings," he said. "Do you understand that? For years, I didn't even know what I wanted because every time I wanted something, you were there destabilizing it." Tate's eyes lowered. "You breadcrumbed me for decades," Noah said bitterly. "And the worst part is you didn't even do it on purpose half the time. That's what makes it worse." Tate flinched again at that honesty. Noah pointed at him now, voice breaking into anger again. "The moment you finally figured out what you wanted from me wasn't during 22 years of sleeping next to me." He shook his head. "Not during high school, not during Brown, not even during the time before you married Chloe, not during any of it." Tate's expression tightened at the mention of their past. "It was when I got engaged," Noah said flatly. Silence. "That's when it clicked for you," Noah continued. "That's when you suddenly decided I mattered in that way." Tate swallowed hard. "That's not." "No," Noah cut in immediately. "Don't rewrite it." His breathing sharpened. "You know what I did in my 20s because of you," Noah said. "I barely dated, barely slept with anyone, barely let myself exist in that part of my life because I was always waiting for you to either come back or ruin it again." Tate looked like he was physically struggling to hear it. Noah's voice broke slightly, but he didn't stop. "I didn't even get to be young properly," he said, "because every time I tried to move forward you were there emotionally dragging me backward." Tate whispered, "I never meant to take anything from you." "But you did," Noah shot back instantly. The room went still again. Noah's eyes were glassy now, but his anger kept him standing. "I couldn't even sleep next to someone without thinking," he continued, voice shaking harder now, "that the person beside me was going to disappear emotionally the second I stopped being exactly what they wanted." Tate's face tightened, pain flashing across it. "I hated being gay for a while," Noah said suddenly. That made Tate go completely still. Noah exhaled sharply, like the admission itself burned coming out. "Not because of being gay," he clarified quickly, voice rough, "because of you." Tate looked like he'd been hit. Noah wiped at his face angrily, furious at himself for even breaking like this in front of him. "I lost years," Noah said. "Years of being out, proud, normal, and free because I was always afraid you'd either destroy me emotionally or call me something I couldn't come back from." Tate's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Noah laughed bitterly through his tears. I'm in therapy now, he said. Do you know that? Because I had to fix the mess you left in my head. Tate flinched again, visibly shrinking. Noah shook his head, voice rising again. So, if you wouldn't mind, he said sharply, take your little emotional breakdown, your obsession, and go somewhere else. Tate's eyes lifted slightly at that. Noah's voice turned cutting. I bought my ticket to another stop, he said. I'm not boarding your train anymore. Tate looked like he was trying to breathe through something breaking inside him. Noah stepped closer now, shaking with emotion. You don't get to rewrite my life because you finally decided you want me, he said. You don't get to show up late and act like love is supposed to reset everything. Tate whispered, I never thought it would reset everything. No, Noah interrupted, voice low and sharp, you thought I would. That silence landed like a final confirmation. Noah shook his head slowly. I'm done. Tate's voice came out cracked, Noah. No, Noah said firmly, I changed my phone number for a reason. Tate froze again at that. Noah pointed at him one last time, voice trembling with exhaustion and fury and something like heartbreak finally settling into place. The next time you want to come near me, he said quietly, don't. Tate's eyes widened slightly. Noah's voice broke just a little at the end, despite everything. I have one shot at building a decent life, he said, and I'm not letting you destroy it again. Tate didn't speak. Noah took a step back toward the door. Then stopped one final time. His voice dropped. Be a gentleman for once, he said, leave me alone. And then he walked out. The door shut behind him softly this time, not a slam but something worse. Final. The automatic doors of the psychiatric unit slid open with a soft mechanical hiss, and Tate stepped out into late morning light that felt too bright for how little sleep he'd actually had. 72 hours in a psych ward does things to people. It didn't feel like recovery. It felt like compression, like someone had taken everything inside his head and pressed it down into something tighter, heavier, harder to carry without breaking apart. Susie was already waiting by the curb. Her arms were crossed over the hood of her car, her expression sharp in the way only someone who had known both Tate and Noah for years could manage without flinching. Tate didn't speak right away. He just adjusted the sleeve of his jacket as if it suddenly didn't fit him correctly anymore. Behind him, Dr. Klein stepped out as well, clipboard tucked under her arm, calm professionalism intact. Tate, she said gently, extending a hand. He shook it. You did well completing the hold, she said. Given the intensity of your emotional presentation, I strongly recommend continuing outpatient care immediately. I'm referring you to a psychiatrist in downtown LA. Tate gave a small nod. Okay. Dr. Klein studied him for a second longer, like she was checking whether the version of him standing there matched the version she'd been treating inside. Then she softened slightly. You're not in trouble, but I want to see improvement in how you react emotionally when you're not in control. You do need support that doesn't depend on crisis points. Tate didn't answer that, he just nodded again, quieter this time. Take care of yourself, she added. And then she went back inside. The doors closed. And just like that, he was out. Susie opened the passenger door without a word. Tate got in. The car was quiet for exactly 58 seconds. Then Susie exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding it in since the moment she saw him. You really know how to ruin my best friend's life, don't you, Tate? Tate didn't even ask which of her best friends she meant, he already knew. Noah. Of course, Noah. Susie pulled into traffic, merging smoothly into the LA morning flow, her knuckles tight on the steering wheel. I want to see him this morning, she continued. That made Tate look slightly toward her, but he didn't interrupt. He was upset, Susie said flatly. Tate's jaw tightened. He's always upset around me, Tate muttered. Susie shot him a look so sharp it cut the air between them. No, she corrected immediately, not like that, don't reduce it to that. Silence again. Tate leaned his head back against the seat, staring out the windshield without really seeing anything. He came to visit you, Susie said, voice rising slightly now, controlled but edged. After everything, he came to give you a chance to hear him out. Tate's throat moved as he swallowed. I didn't ask him to. No, Susie cut in. You didn't ask him to, you just destabilized him enough that he came anyway. That landed. Tate didn't respond. Susie kept going because once she started, there wasn't much stopping her. And then what happened? She asked. He shows up for you, he tries to say what he needs to say, and you attack him emotionally, sleep with him, and then ask him to blow up his entire life. Tate's head turned slightly toward the window. I didn't attack him, he said quietly. Susie let out a humorless laugh. Tate, you are not going to rewrite this in your head already. That stung more than she probably intended. The car hit a red light. Susie turned slightly toward him. I'm not saying Noah is innocent in all of this, she said more carefully now. He made his choices too, but you don't get to act like you didn't just blow up a carefully constructed life he fought hard for. Tate's voice came out lower. I didn't want to hurt him. That's not the point, Susie replied immediately. Nobody who loves us wants to cause harm, that's not what matters. The light turned green, she drove again. Tate stared down at his hand. I was trying to tell him how I feel, he said. You've had 24 years to do that, Susie said bluntly. Tate flinched slightly at the number. That's what makes this so hard to watch, she continued. Your feelings are not new, it's just finally loud enough that you can't ignore it anymore. Tate swallowed again. He's engaged, Susie added. I know. And he still came to you. Tate's jaw tightened. Yes. Susie glanced at him again. That's the part you're not sitting with, she said quietly. He came, Tate, that doesn't mean he's available, it means he's human. Tate didn't respond. The car hummed through traffic, the city moving around them like nothing inside either of them was breaking apart. After a long silence, Tate finally spoke. He said I ruined him. Susie didn't answer immediately. Then softer now, did he say that exactly? Tate nodded once. Susie exhaled through her nose. Frustrated but no longer just angry. Then you need to understand something, she said. Noah doesn't say things like that lightly. Tate stared out the window. I didn't mean to become that person, he said quietly. I know, Susie replied. A pause. Then she added more pointedly. But you still have to deal with the fact that you did. That sentence sat in the car like a weight neither of them moved away from. Tate finally spoke again, barely audible. What do I do now? Susie didn't hesitate. You go to therapy, she said. Consistently, not just when you break, you learn how to sit with your feelings without turning them into emergencies for other people. Tate gave a faint, tired laugh. That sounds easy when you say it like that. It's not easy, she replied, it's just necessary. Another beat of silence. Then Susie's voice softened slightly, though her eyes stayed on the road. And you stop trying to decide what Noah's life should look like, she said, because every time you do that you don't just lose him more, you hurt him. Tate closed his eyes. I already lost him, he murmured. Susie didn't correct him. She didn't comfort him either. She just said, yeah, and now you have to figure out what kind of person you are after that. The car kept moving through LA. And for the first time since the psych ward doors had opened, Tate didn't have anything to argue back with. Susie's car was quiet for most of the drive out of the hospital district. Not peaceful and quiet. Controlled quiet. The kind of silence that meant she was actively choosing not to say what she really thought because if she started, she might not stop. Tate sat rigid in the passenger seat, hands folded tightly in his lap, staring out at the blur of Lowe's angels passing by. The city looked unchanged. That was what unsettled him most. Everything inside him had shifted violently, and outside of him nothing had adjusted to match it. After a few minutes he cleared his throat. Sue. Don't, she said immediately. Tate hesitated, then tried again anyway, softer. Did he say anything about me? Susie didn't look at him. Tate swallowed. Does he want to see me again? That question did it. Susie slammed the brakes so hard the tires briefly squealed against the road. Tate lurched forward violently, his shoulder hitting the glove compartment and his forehead clipping the edge of the dashboard with a dull, sharp knock. Jesus, Tate groaned, grabbing his head. Susie didn't even flinch. That, she said coldly, turning to him now, eyes blazing, was for Noah. Tate blinked, stunned, rubbing his forehead. Are you serious? Oh, I'm serious, Susie snapped. You have a lot of nerve even asking that after what you've put him through. Tate straightened slowly, still disoriented. I didn't mean. No, she cut in, you don't get to I didn't mean your way out of this one. The car idled at a red light, but Susie kept her foot hard on the brake as she trusted herself too little to relax it. You show up in his life after years of emotional chaos you caused, she continued sharply. You destabilize him, you sleep with him, you try to pull him away from his fiancée, and now you want updates on whether he misses you. Tate looked down, jaw tight. That's not what I asked. It's exactly what you asked. Silence stretched between them. Susie exhaled through her nose, shaking her head in disbelief. You remember before Chloe, she said suddenly. Tate went still at the name. Susie didn't soften. When you disappeared on him right before you married her, she continued, voice rising, I told Noah if I ever saw you again, I'd rip off both your balls and shove them down your throat. Tate's eyes widened slightly. Susie. I meant it, she said flatly. The light turned green. She drove again, more aggressively now. You don't get to play the confused victim in this, she continued. You don't get to act like you're just some tragic romantic hero who finally realized he's in love. Tate leaned his head back against the seat, exhausted. I am not acting like a victim. Susie laughed once, sharp and humorless. No, then what do you call asking me if Noah wants to see you? Tate didn't answer. Because from where I'm sitting, she said, it sounds like you're still trying to find a door back into his life. Tate's voice came out quieter. I just want to know where I stand. Susie turned to him briefly again, eyes narrowing. You don't stand anywhere, she said, that's the point. That hit harder than the dashboard. Tate looked away. Susie kept going anyway, because now she was fully in it. You are not in a position, she said, to ask what Noah wants from you. You're in a position to accept that you've done real damage and stop making it worse. Tate's throat moved. I didn't set out to damage him. Nobody sets out to, Susie replied immediately. That's not the standard. She tightened her grip on the wheel. The standard is impact, she said, not intent. Tate went quiet. A few seconds passed, then quieter, almost reluctantly. Is he okay? Susie scoffed. That's the question you should have been asking first. Tate flinched. He's functioning, she said after a beat. He's angry, he's hurt, and he's trying very hard to stay in the life he built. Tate closed his eyes briefly. Susie glanced at him again. And before you ask, she added, no, that does not mean you get to interpret that as him secretly waiting for you. Tate opened his eyes again slowly. I wasn't going to. You were, she interrupted, you always do. Silence again. The car merged onto a wider street, the city opening up into long stretches of traffic and glass buildings. After a long stretch, Tate spoke again, voice smaller. I don't know how to turn it off. Susie didn't respond right away. Then she said, quieter than before but still firm. Then you learn, she said, because Noah can't be the person you practice on anymore. Tate stared out the window. A long pause passed between them. Susie exhaled slowly, the anger in her voice finally shifting into something more tired. I haven't heard from Andrew since you went into the psych ward, she said abruptly. Tate blinked, confused by the shift. Andrew. Yes, she said, my life, other people's lives, remember those. Tate didn't respond. I want you, she continued, to go check on him, not Noah, not yourself, someone you're not emotionally entangled with for 5 seconds. Tate frowned slightly. Why? Because, she said sharply, you need to remember that the world doesn't revolve around your emotional crises. That landed. Susie tightened her jaw again. And because, she added, you need to practice caring about someone without turning it into a disaster. Tate looked down at his hands. I can do that, he said quietly. Susie shot him a look. I'm not asking if you can, she said, I'm telling you to try. The car slowed as they pulled into Tate's house on the same street as Noah. A large ranch-style mansion, quiet, affluent, the kind of place that didn't look like it had room for the kind of emotional collapse that had just happened in it. Susie parked. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Susie spoke again, voice lower now but sharper in meaning. And Tate. He looked at her. If you even think, she said carefully, about going after Noah again while he's trying to build his life after he gets married before he gets married anytime. She paused. I will not just threaten your balls, she said calmly. I will follow through with my threat. Tate swallowed. Susie held his gaze. Leave him alone, she said, unless you become someone who would never do this to him again. A beat. Then she added more quietly. And right now you're not that person. Tate didn't argue. For once he just sat there, hand still on the seatbelt, not moving toward the door. Susie exhaled softer now. Get out, she said, and for once in your life don't make this about you. The next afternoon, Tate drove his red pickup to Andrew's clinic. The building, financed by Joey for Andrew, was an impressive 3-story structure with a sleek, modern design. Andrew had personally overseen its construction, and the clinic had opened 18 months before Joey's cancer diagnosis. Tate parked outside and sat in the truck for a moment, staring at the building through the windshield. Then he finally stepped out, closed the door, and made his way inside. Tate stood outside the clinic on N Bunker Hill Street for a moment longer than he intended. The lobby was bright and immaculate, with polished floors, glass walls, and modern furniture arranged throughout the spacious entrance. Tate walked toward the staircase and began climbing. One flight. Then another. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, Tate had grown quiet and thoughtful. He walked down the hallway until he finally reached Andrew's outer office. He stopped in front of the door, took a slow breath, and raised his hand to knock. The building looked too ordinary for how much tension he was carrying into it. Glass door, clean signage, a quiet waiting room behind it. Nothing about it suggested it was connected to the kind of emotional wreckage he was trying to repair or avoid worsening. He finally pushed the door open. A small bell chimed. The receptionist looked up immediately. Do you have an appointment, dear? She asked. Tate hesitated. No, I'm a personal friend of Dr. Lott. I just wanted to check on Andrew. I heard he had a fatigue incident a few days ago. Her expression softened a little at that. Oh yes, one moment. She gestured toward a chair. You can take a seat, he's finishing up with his last patient. Tate nodded and sat. The waiting room smelled faintly like antiseptic and paper coffee. A TV in the corner played muted daytime news that nobody was watching. Tate kept his hands clasped together, staring down at them, realizing for the first time in days that he wasn't actively fighting with anyone and didn't quite know what to do with that. 20 minutes passed. When the receptionist finally returned, she smiled politely. You can go on in, she said. Dr. Andrew Lott's done with his last patient. I'll let him know I'm leaving for the day and I'll be back at 8 tomorrow. Tate stood immediately. Thank you. She nodded, already gathering her things. Tate walked down the hallway, she pointed out, each step quieter than the last. The door at the end had a simple brass plate, Dr. Andrew Lott. He knocked once. A pause. Come in, came a voice from inside. Tate opened the door. Dr. Andrew Lott was sitting behind his desk. He didn't look fully recovered, not exactly sick, but worn in a way that suggested his body had recently forced him to stop pretending it could keep up. There was a tiredness around his eyes, and his posture carried the residue of someone who had spent too long pushing through exhaustion. But when he looked up and saw Tate, something in his expression shifted immediately. Recognition. Surprise. And then, despite everything, a small smile. Tate, Dr. Lott said gently, this is unexpected. Tate stepped inside, closing the door behind him carefully. I didn't know if I should come, Tate admitted. Dr. Lott leaned back slightly in his chair, studying him for a second. Yet here you are. Tate gave a short, uneasy breath. Susie told me about your incident. At that, Andrew's smile faded just a fraction, not gone but tempered. Of course she did, he murmured. Susie has never been subtle in her concern. Tate nodded once, then hesitated like he was weighing how honest to be. I'm not here to intrude, he said. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Dr. Lott looked at him for a long moment, then gestured lightly toward the chair across from him. Sit, he said. Tate sat. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was measured, two people trying to understand what role they were supposed to play in each other's lives. Dr. Lott finally spoke again. I'm all right, he said carefully. Or at least I'm functioning again. The fatigue incident was my body telling me I was pretending too hard to be fine. Tate nodded slowly. That sounds familiar. A faint knowing look crossed Andrew's face. I imagine it does. Tate's gaze dropped briefly to the floor before returning. I don't know what Susie told you, Tate said. Andrew raised an eyebrow slightly. Susie doesn't usually leave room for interpretation. That made Tate exhale once, almost a laugh, but it didn't fully land as humor. I'm trying to fix things, Tate said, then paused, correcting himself, or stop making them worse. Andrew studied him quietly. That's a better goal than most people manage, he said. Tate shook his head slightly. It doesn't feel like it. A beat of silence. Andrew leaned forward a little, resting his forearms on his desk. Tate, he said gently, what exactly are you doing here? The question wasn't accusatory. It was grounding. Tate hesitated. I think I've been, he started, then stopped, searching for the right words. I've been pulling people into my orbit without realizing I'm still in motion. Dr. Lott didn't interrupt. And Noah, Tate paused, jaw tightening slightly at the name. Noah is trying to build a life that doesn't include that orbit. Andrew's expression shifted subtly at that, understanding flickering in. And Susie sent you here, he said quietly. Tate shook his head. She told me to stop making everything about Noah. Dr. Lott let that sit for a moment. Then he said carefully, and you came here anyway. Tate didn't deny it. The silence stretched again, more like an examination than a confrontation. Finally Andrew spoke, softer now. How is he? Tate looked up immediately, almost reflexively. Andrew held his gaze steadily. I'm not asking because I want details, he added. I'm asking because I care about him too, and because I can tell you're carrying him in your head even when you're not supposed to be. That landed differently. Tate's shoulders tightened slightly. He's angry, Tate said quietly. He has every right to be. Dr. Lott nodded once. Tate swallowed, and he's trying to stay away from me. Dr. Lott's expression softened slightly. That sounds like someone trying to protect himself, he said. Tate looked down again. I don't know how to stop being this, Tate admitted. Andrew studied him for a long moment. Then he said calmly but firmly. Then don't focus on stopping everything at once. Tate looked up. Focus on not acting on it, Dr. Lott continued. Not every feeling requires movement, not every impulse requires a door to someone else's life. Tate absorbed that quietly. Andrew leaned back slightly again, exhaling. And for what it's worth, he added, showing up here to check on me instead of going to him or contacting him directly, that's actually a step in the right direction. Tate nodded faintly. But his expression was still heavy. Dr. Lott noticed. So, he said gently, are you here because you're trying to do better, or because you're trying to find another way back toward him without realizing it? Tate went still. For the first time since walking into the clinic, he didn't have an immediate answer. Andrew set the teacup down first. Carefully. Like even the ceramic needed to be handled in a way that wouldn't crack under pressure. Tate watched him over the rim of his own cup, legs stretched out in Andrew Lott's office chair, as if he belonged there more than he should have. The tea was too hot, but he kept sipping anyway, like discomfort was just another normal setting for him. I heard you got out of the psych ward yesterday, Andrew said. Tate's eyebrows lifted slightly. Good news travels fast. I received a call from Dr. Klein, Andrew replied. She mentioned you passed the 72-hour hold with flying colors. Tate straightened a little, visibly pleased. Flying colors. Andrew nodded, except for the incident with Mandy. Tate paused. That was a misunderstanding. Andrew gave him a faint look. It was still disruptive. Tate leaned back again, looking offended. I feel like you're judging me. I'm observing you, Andrew corrected gently. Tate pointed at him. That's worse. For a moment Andrew didn't respond, he just watched him. Then he exhaled through his nose, softer now. I'm sorry, Andrew said. That immediately pulled Tate's attention fully back. For what? Tate asked. Andrew didn't look away. For you, he said simply. Tate blinked once. That's dramatic. I failed you, Andrew continued anyway. Not in a clinical sense, not officially, but as someone who has known you around the edges of your life for a long time. Tate's expression shifted slightly, like he wasn't used to being the subject of sincerity without consequence. Andrew continued. I spent years observing you instead of engaging you, he said. 10 years if I'm being precise about it, watching patterns, not asking questions I should have asked. Tate leaned forward slightly. You're being weirdly emotional right now. I'm trying to be honest, Andrew said. Tate gave a small, awkward laugh. That's usually my department. Andrew ignored that. I should have asked you what was wrong, he said, instead of assuming I understood you through behavior alone. Tate picked up his teacup again more slowly this time. You're a psychologist, that's kind of your whole thing. Yes, Andrew agreed, and I still missed things. Tate studied him for a second. Then, lighter again, he leaned back. Well, you didn't try to institutionalize me or call me a sociopath. So I'd say you're ahead of most professionals I've met. Andrew gave him a flat look. That's your standard. It's a low bar, Tate admitted. That earned a brief, reluctant exhale from Andrew, almost a laugh but restrained. Then Andrew set his cup down properly. I want to help you, Tate, he said, not to save you but to encourage you to pursue a better path towards your goals. Tate tilted his head. You already are helping me, you gave me tea. That is not what I mean. Tate shrugged. It's a strong start. Andrew watched him carefully for a moment before continuing. You've lied to me before, Andrew said. Tate didn't respond immediately. Not defensive yet, just still. I understand why, Andrew added quickly, and I'm not judging you for it. Tate raised an eyebrow. That sounds like judgment with extra steps. It's not, Andrew said firmly. A pause. Tate nodded quietly as Andrew continued. I know saying this in this building probably hurts, Andrew said carefully, especially because Joey financed this place and because of everything that happened afterward, but maybe something good came out of all of this. You met Noah. Tate lowered his eyes. I started this clinic because I wanted to build something that could actually help people, Andrew continued. But we have to live with the reality that life isn't always sunshine and roses. Sometimes parents are just crap. Sometimes childhood isn't filled with happy memories. Sometimes childhood is about survival. He paused, watching Tate carefully. And Tate, if I ever made your situation harder, if my friendships, my involvement, or my mentorship somehow made your life more unbearable than it already was, I'm sorry. Tate looked up at him. Andrew's expression remained solemn. I can't change what happened, he said, but I can acknowledge that I was part of your life and that sometimes even people who mean well can make mistakes. You deserved better than having to survive everything alone. Then Andrew leaned forward slightly. I need to ask for forgiveness, he said. I'm sorry I believed what everyone else said about you. Tate nodded once slowly. You're forgiven, just don't analyze me in the future, he said, smirking. But I do want to understand something, Andrew continued. Not as your shrink, not as Noah's friend, as someone trying to make sense of what happened. I'm your friend too, Tate. Tate's expression shifted subtly at Noah's name. Andrew didn't pivot away from it. Why did you tell me you were being followed by a crazy stalker who taught you in high school? Andrew asked gently, when that situation wasn't what you said it was. The room changed temperature immediately. Tate exhaled slowly. That's what we're doing, Tate asked. Yes, Andrew said calmly. Tate looked at Andrew. Because you trusted and idolized my family, Andrew, what was I supposed to say? That the people giving you money to start this clinic didn't believe in therapy or boundaries. That Terrence was terrified that if I was ever seen by a therapist, I'd say the wrong thing and then my father would kill another doctor. Andrew went still. Tate continued, his voice quieter. You respected my family, you believed in them, you believed the money they gave you was helping you build something good. How was I supposed to walk in here and tell you that the same people funding your clinic were the reason I couldn't safely tell anyone what was happening to me? He shook his head. I couldn't, not then. Andrew looked at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. You were afraid of what would happen if you told the truth. Tate nodded. I was afraid of what would happen to everyone, especially Noah, if I did. Andrew didn't raise his voice. That was the worst part. He just sat there, hands loosely folded on the desk, like he was discussing something clinical rather than dismantling the floor beneath Tate's feet piece by piece. All you had to say, Andrew repeated calmly, was that something happened that you don't want to disclose the identity of the other person involved. Tate stared at him. Andrew continued steady. I would have accepted that boundary. I do accept boundaries, that's part of my job. A pause. So why lie? Tate's throat moved, but nothing came out at first. He looked away toward the window like it might offer him an exit strategy. It didn't. I didn't want you digging, Tate said finally. Andrew nodded once. That part I understand. Tate looked back at him cautious. You do. Yes, Andrew said. You're not the first person to try to control the direction of a conversation by limiting the information available. Tate let out a short breath, half laugh, half tension release. Andrew's tone didn't change. But you didn't just withhold information, he said, you constructed a false explanation. Tate's fingers tightened around the cup again. I had to give you a face, Tate said quietly, something clean, something you'd stop questioning. So I wouldn't keep asking, Andrew finished. Tate nodded once. Andrew leaned back slightly. That part is also understandable, he said. Tate blinked, caught off guard. It is. Yes, Andrew replied, but understanding a motive isn't the same as accepting the method. Silence settled again. Then Andrew exhaled slowly, like he was choosing what came next very carefully. I also said something earlier, Andrew continued, that I need to clarify. Tate watched him warily. Andrew met his eyes. I said I know your secrets, he said. Tate's posture tightened immediately. Andrew held up a hand slightly, not defensive but steadying. I need you to understand what I meant by that, he said. I don't mean I have access to your life in some absolute sense. I don't mean I've been collecting things about you like evidence. A beat. I mean, I've been around your orbit long enough to notice patterns you haven't fully named out loud. Tate didn't relax. Andrew continued anyway. And I want to be very clear, he said, I am not trying to threaten you. Tate gave a short, humorless laugh. That's what it feels like. I understand that, Andrew said immediately, but that is not my intent. A pause. Then Andrew leaned forward slightly again. What I do know, he said carefully, is that you live your life in compartments. Tate's eyes narrowed slightly. You present different versions of yourself depending on what environment you're in, Andrew continued. Partner, patient, friend, observer, crisis point. Tate cut in sharply, that's everyone. Not to this degree, Andrew said. That landed heavier. Andrew didn't soften it. I also know, he continued, that you have relationships that overlap in ways you don't fully acknowledge to the people involved in them. Tate's grip on the cup tightened. Andrew kept going. You have Noah, he said, and he has a fiancé, and you have other attachments that you compartmentalize further. Tate's face flickered just for a moment. Can we please not use the word fiancé? Tate said quietly. It brings up unpleasant memories. Andrew immediately nodded. Of course, he said, we won't use it. Tate gave a small nod, visibly relieved that Andrew hadn't pressed him for an explanation. Thank you. Andrew leaned back in his chair. You don't have to talk about anything you're not ready to talk about. If a particular word or subject makes things harder, we can leave it alone. Tate nodded again, his shoulders relaxing slightly. For once, he didn't feel like he had to defend why something hurt. Andrew watched it carefully. I also know, Andrew added, that you avoid direct self-confrontation by externalizing blame structures whenever things get too emotionally unstable. Tate set the teacup down carefully this time, too carefully. A soft clink. The silence after it felt loud. Then Andrew said, quieter now. And I know why you had that episode at the Bistro Cafe when I asked you about Wayne. Tate went still. Andrew didn't rush. I thought, Andrew said, that you were being blackmailed over something impulsive, a mistake, something messy but survivable. He paused. I did not realize the extent of what you were carrying. Tate's face had gone pale in a way that didn't match his earlier sarcasm. Andrew's voice softened slightly but stayed firm. I did not know, he said, That Wayne's leverage over you was tied to something you experienced as far more serious than I originally assumed. Tate swallowed hard. Andrew continued more carefully now. I am telling you this, he said, because I don't want you to think I was trying to corner you with misinformation or ambush you. A pause. I was trying to understand you in a way that would keep you safe, Andrew said, not expose you. Tate stared at him, breathing shallowly now. Andrew's tone dropped further. And I need you to hear this part very clearly, he added. I would never hurt you on purpose. Silence. Tate looked down at the teacup as if it had become unfamiliar. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. You already are, he said. Andrew didn't interrupt. Tate shook his head slightly, like he was trying to stabilize himself. You just do it politely, he added, that's the difference. Andrew held his gaze. No, Andrew said firmly, the difference is intent versus impact. Tate let out a sharp, unstable breath. That doesn't help me, he muttered. I know, Andrew said. A beat. Then softer. But it's still true. And for the first time in the conversation, Andrew didn't follow it with another layer. He just let the truth sit there between them, unsoftened, unhidden, and impossible to sip tea around. Tate's chair scraped back hard enough against the floor to make the whole office seem to jolt. What kind of freaks do you treat in this clinic? He snapped. The words came out sharper than he probably intended, but not by much. The air in the room tightened immediately. Andrew didn't react the way most people would. No anger, no defensiveness, no escalation. He simply set his teacup down with deliberate calm. The sound of ceramic meeting wood was almost too soft for how heavy everything else felt. Andrew looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke. I treat patients, he said evenly, who have survived sexual violence, coercion, and long-term psychological familial trauma. Tate blinked once. Andrew continued. I work with people who have testified against partners, family members, spouses, or people they once trusted completely. Tate's expression flickered, something between irritation and discomfort. Andrew didn't stop. I work with people who struggle to recognize their own boundaries because those boundaries were repeatedly ignored or violated, he said. People who learned to survive by fragmenting their experiences just enough to keep functioning. Tate's jaw tightened. Andrew leaned forward slightly now, not aggressive, just present. And I also work with people, he added, who redirect their distress outward when they feel cornered. That landed. Tate gave a short, bitter laugh. You know what the really funny part about all this is, he said. You're treating people who have unfortunate circumstances with the money you got for this clinic from my family. Don't you find that a little inappropriate? Andrew nodded slowly. I know you think it's inappropriate, Andrew said. The money your family gave me to start this clinic came from the same people who sexually abused you as a child. And yes, it's also the same money that helped build the pediatric center at the hospital, the one that has your name and photograph in it. Tate looked away. Andrew continued gently. But maybe something amazing can come out of something horrific. If I had known where your family got its money, I never would have accepted the financing for this place. He paused. But I didn't know. Tate remained silent. Now that I do know, Andrew said, maybe I can use what was given to me to help people instead of letting that money become another thing you have to carry. Maybe this clinic can become something different from the people who funded it. Andrew looked directly at Tate. Maybe we don't have to pretend the past was acceptable. We can acknowledge how horrific it was and still use what came from it to help someone survive their own circumstances. Andrew said quietly, sit down. Tate didn't move at first. For a second, it looked like he might actually leave. Then slowly, reluctantly, he sat back down. The chair creaked under him. Andrew waited until the movement settled. Andrew smiled. Talia and I are putting on a pediatric charity event. Tate scoffed. Another Blue Family pediatric farce. Andrew nodded. I know you think it's wrong for your family to support and finance pediatric charities, Tate, but your mother doesn't know what you know, and even if she did, I think she'd still want to help children. Andrew watched Tate's face carefully. There was a flicker of reluctant agreement in his expression. Do you know what my father used to say about those pediatric charities? Tate asked. Andrew shook his head. My mother would go on and on about them at the dining room table. Whenever I went upstairs to talk to my father afterward, he'd say, "We have to help the children. We have to do something to make sure the children get a leg up in life." Tate's expression hardened. Then he'd make some disgusting joke about how we had to help the children, especially help them out of their clothes. Andrew's smile disappeared. My father was a monster, Tate said flatly. I don't want to think about your pediatric charities. I think this family has helped themselves to enough children already. He paused, his voice turning colder. And I don't mean their charity. I'm sorry for whatever I told you while I was passed out or loopy in my mother's garage that day. I flipped out, Tate said. The day you took me to that awful psych ward. I haven't thanked you for that yet. Andrew nodded. Tate gave a humorless laugh. Do you know what's really funny? All the ways my mother judges me, I can smell it. Everyone Noah met at Brown judges me. I can see what they think about me. He stared at the floor for a moment. My mother thinks she's the paragon of virtue. She thinks she helps children and that everyone has such a great life because Talia Blue gives everything she has to the community. Andrew remained silent, allowing him to continue. I'd love to see the look on her face if I ever told her she's a felon. Tate shook his head. Not because she did it on purpose, she didn't know, that's the worst part, at least that's what I keep telling myself, she didn't know what was happening. His voice dropped. My mother is a criminal, and she hasn't got a clue. Andrew placed a hand gently on Tate's shoulder. Tate continued, his voice strained. I thought since my second birthday that my mother was wicked, because there was no way she didn't know, not after almost 25 years of my life. How could a woman live in that house day in and day out and not know what I was going through? He swallowed hard. I hated her because I thought only a monster could do that to a child. How does a mother bring her son into an environment like that and allow him to grow up drowning in self-hatred and disgust for his own existence? Andrew listened without interrupting. I thought she turned her attention away from the truth because she wanted to protect her affluent lifestyle and her social standing. I thought she chose comfort over me. Tate's jaw tightened. Hate isn't a strong enough word for what I felt toward her. If what Terrence told me was true, that she knew and did nothing, I thought I had every moral right to kill her for what she'd done to me by doing nothing to help. He looked toward Andrew. But she didn't know. The words seemed to frustrate him more than anything else. I can't believe she didn't know. I know she didn't. That's what makes it so impossible to understand. Tate's voice was heavy with anger and disbelief. How blind do you have to be? How do you look in the mirror every day of your life and never see the truth? Andrew remained quiet. She committed a felony every day of my childhood and never even knew it. That's how evil my father was, Andrew. He played her from the beginning. He played this whole fucking city. Tate shook his head. He robbed her of 30 years of her life, 30 years she'll never get back. He paused, struggling with the thought that followed. And if she ever figures it all out? His voice became quieter. And I don't just mean what her in-laws did to me. I mean what she caused to happen in my own life without even knowing she was doing it. Andrew's expression softened. I don't think she'll be able to live with it, Tate whispered. I don't think she'll be able to handle knowing that she failed me even though she never understood what was happening. Andrew kept his hand on Tate's shoulder. That's an enormous burden for her to carry, he said gently, but it doesn't have to become yours to carry for her. Tate's voice cracked slightly. The whole situation with my mother sickens me, and her not knowing doesn't make it better. He lowered his eyes. It just means I have one family member who's still alive who isn't a monster. Andrew waited until the room settled again. Tate had stopped drinking the tea entirely. The cup sat in his hands like he'd forgotten it was something he was supposed to be doing. The silence between them had changed texture. Less interrogative now. More exposed. Tate finally broke it, voice quieter than before. Are you embarrassed about your childhood? Andrew didn't react immediately. He didn't rush to correct the framing, didn't deflect it, didn't turn it into something clinical. He just shook his head once. No, Andrew said simply. Tate studied him, skeptical. Not at all. Andrew leaned back slightly in his chair, hands resting loosely. It's not something I go around telling people in casual conversation, he added, but I talk about it in therapy settings with patients, with supervision when it's relevant. Tate's eyes narrowed slightly, so it is a secret. It's private, Andrew corrected calmly, not hidden. That distinction made Tate pause for a fraction of a second. Andrew continued. In this clinic, he said, it's not a secret. Out there in the world, it's not a secret either in the sense that I deny it or avoid it. He gestured slightly with one hand. It's just not something I unload onto people who haven't consented to carry it. Tate gave a short, humorless breath. That's a very therapist answer. Andrew's mouth twitched faintly, not quite a smile. It's also a boundary answer, he said. Tate looked down at the tea again, then back up. So you don't think it's shameful? Andrew didn't hesitate. No, he said again. I think it's painful, but I found a family in LA, people, survivors of similar situations who live like a network. We help each other and heal together. That landed differently. A beat passed. Tate's grip on the cup tightened slightly. Andrew watched that reaction carefully, then spoke more softly. I don't have a right to derail someone's entire day by dropping trauma into it without context, he said, but I also don't believe in pretending it didn't happen. Tate's voice came out quieter, so you just carry it normally. I carry it integrated, Andrew corrected, not buried, not performed, not weaponized. Tate let out a small breath, like he didn't fully understand the difference but could feel it anyway. Andrew leaned forward slightly now, his tone shifting, less analysis, more grounding. And Tate, he said gently. Tate looked up. What happened to you, Andrew continued, is not something that belongs to your identity as a problem person. Tate's expression tightened at that word. Andrew noticed and adjusted immediately. It belongs to your history, he clarified, not your worth. Silence. Tate looked away first. Andrew didn't push the eye contact. Instead, he continued, steady but firm. The people who harmed you, he said, or the systems that allowed harm to happen around you, they are responsible for what they did. A pause. And whatever you had to do to survive that environment, he added, does not make you inherently defective. Tate's jaw flexed slightly. Andrew's voice softened further but stayed precise. I wish, he said, someone had protected you properly at the time you needed it. That sentence didn't land like sympathy. It landed like recognition. Tate gave a small, unstable laugh under his breath, but it wasn't amused. That's a nice thing to say, he muttered. It's a true thing to say, Andrew replied. Tate stared at him for a long moment. Then quieter. You don't even really know me. Andrew nodded once. That's correct, he said, not fully. A pause. But I know enough to see that you've been forced to interpret your past as something that says something about your value as a person. Tate's eyes flickered. Andrew continued. And I want to be very clear with you, he said, that interpretation is not accurate. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty anymore, it was heavy in a different way. Tate finally spoke, voice lower. So what am I supposed to do with it? Andrew didn't answer immediately. He let the question sit. Then, you don't fix it by rewriting it in one conversation, he said. You don't fix it by confessing it all at once. A beat. You start by stopping it from defining every relationship you walk into next. Tate looked down at the tea again. For the first time in a while, he didn't interrupt. And Andrew, watching him carefully, didn't try to fill the silence. Andrew watched Tate for a long moment before speaking again. His tone stayed even, but something in it had shifted, less analytical now, more carefully direct. Did your father know? Andrew asked. Tate's eyes flicked up immediately. About everything, Andrew continued. The stalking, the men who tried to take advantage of you, any of it did he know or help stop it? Tate's jaw tightened. For a second it looked like he might stand up and leave again. Then he shook his head once. Yes, my father knew and scheduled weekly access to me, he said flatly. Andrew didn't react outwardly to that answer, but he didn't let it pass either. So he was not part of your protection network, he said quietly. Tate gave a short, tired breath. There was no one I could tell. I don't want to talk about it, Andrew, let it lie. A pause. Then Tate added more firmly. Everyone who hurt me can't hurt me anymore, let it lie. Silence. Andrew didn't push immediately, he simply nodded once, acknowledging the boundary. Then carefully. I hear you, he said. Tate's shoulders loosened slightly, but only a fraction. Andrew continued anyway, softer now. And I want you to know something before we move off it, he said. Tate looked at him cautiously. I'm not going to share with anyone what you tell me, Andrew said, because that is not my right. A pause. It's your story, your past, your choice. Tate didn't respond, but his breathing slowed slightly. Andrew leaned forward just a little, hands clasped. You decide when it's shared and with whom, he continued, just like any other part of identity that carries social weight. Tate's brow furrowed slightly at that. Andrew clarified. People come out as gay on their own timeline, he said, or as survivors of something, or as anything that carries vulnerability in disclosure. Tate gave a short, skeptical look. You're comparing it to sexuality now. I'm comparing it to autonomy, Andrew corrected calmly, not category. A beat. Then Andrew's tone shifted slightly, still steady but more grounded, more personal. But I want to challenge one belief you just expressed, he added. Tate tilted his head. You said let it lie, Andrew repeated. Tate nodded once, yeah. Andrew held his gaze. I don't think that means what you think it means, he said. Tate frowned, it means I'm done talking about it. It also can mean, Andrew said carefully, that the experiences are still carrying weight in you, but you've decided the only way to stay functional is to stop looking at them directly. Tate's expression tightened again. Andrew didn't stop. That strategy can help you survive, he said, but it doesn't always help you heal. Tate looked away briefly. Andrew continued, quieter now. You're not wasting time by being afraid of what people will think, he said. That fear makes sense given what you've described. A pause. But you are at risk, he added, of letting that fear decide what parts of your life you are allowed to process at all. Tate gave a small humorless laugh. So what, I'm supposed to go tell Noah everything, he asked. Andrew shook his head immediately. No, he said, that is not what I'm saying. Tate watched him carefully. Andrew leaned back slightly. I am not telling you to disclose your past to anyone in your life on demand, he said. I am telling you that secrecy and shame are not the same thing as safety. Tate's jaw tightened. Andrew continued. You said something important, he added. Tate didn't respond. You said you feel shame about what happened to you, Andrew said. Tate nodded once, I do. Andrew held that for a second, then replied gently. I believe you, he said, but I also think you might be underestimating how much effort it takes to keep something unspoken without it shaping your behavior. Silence. Tate shifted slightly in his chair. Andrew watched him carefully. You also said something else, Andrew added. Tate looked up. You said you don't want to be seen as broken or bonkers because of your past. Tate's expression tightened, yeah. Andrew nodded. I understand that, he said, but I want to offer you a different frame. A pause. You are not your trauma, Andrew said, but you are also not someone who has to pretend it never happened in order to be acceptable. Tate looked down at his hands. Andrew's voice softened further. I use my past in my work, he said, not because I enjoy it, not because I owe it to anyone, but because I chose to integrate it in a way that helps other people instead of isolating me. Tate glanced up. Andrew added more carefully. That does not mean you have to do the same thing. A beat. It means you get to choose whether your past is something you carry alone. He said, or something you eventually bring into the light in a controlled, safe way that doesn't destroy you. Tate exhaled slowly. And right now, Tate asked quietly. Andrew didn't hesitate. Right now, he said, I think you're still in survival mode. Silence settled again. Then Andrew added, softer but firm. And survival mode is not the place where you make decisions about your entire future life with Noah or your fiancé or anyone else. Tate didn't answer. But for once he didn't argue either. And in the quiet that followed, Andrew simply stayed present, no longer interrogating, no longer extracting, just holding the space long enough for Tate to realize he didn't have to fill it with defenses to stay in the room. Andrew didn't answer immediately. Andrew let the silence sit long enough that it stopped feeling like interrogation and started feeling like containment. Then he spoke. Andrew continued, steady and careful. And I want to separate two things you're mixing together right now. A pause. Whether Noah is choosing to step away from you right now, he said, and whether your existence in his life is inherently harmful. Tate let out a small, humorless breath. Feels like the same thing. It doesn't have to be, Andrew said. Tate finally glanced up at him, eyes tired in a way that went deeper than anger. Andrew didn't push. Instead, he shifted slightly in his chair, less distance between them now. I think, Andrew said, that you are trying to solve a relational crisis by assigning yourself total moral responsibility for every outcome. Tate's jaw tightened. That's because it is my fault. Andrew shook his head once. No, he said firmly, not harshly, that's not an accurate framework. A beat. Tate looked away again. Andrew continued softer. You're taking a moment where you are overwhelmed, emotionally dysregulated and dealing with consequences, he said, and turning it into a permanent identity judgment. Tate gave a faint, strained laugh. You make it sound like math. I'm trying to make it survivable to think about, Andrew replied. That landed differently. Tate went quiet again. Andrew watched him for a moment before speaking more slowly. You said Susie told you not to contact Noah, he said. Tate nodded once. And Dr. Klein said something similar, Andrew continued. Another nod. Andrew exhaled gently through his nose. Then I'm going to say something that is not comfortable, he said. Tate's eyes flicked up. If multiple people who care about you are telling you to pause contact unless there are clarity and stability, Andrew said, it's worth taking seriously. Tate swallowed. Andrew didn't soften it, but he didn't weaponize it either. He just continued. Not because you are dangerous, he added, but because the dynamic between you and Noah sounds emotionally volatile right now, and volatility tends to produce decisions that are later regretted. Silence. Tate's voice came out quieter. He said he's done with me. Andrew nodded once. I heard that. A pause. And I also hear that you're interpreting that as a final verdict on your worth. Tate didn't respond, but his expression tightened. Andrew leaned slightly forward. That's the part I want you to challenge, he said gently. A beat. Someone leaving a relationship, however painful that is, does not retroactively determine whether you deserved connection in the first place. Tate looked down. Andrew continued. And I need to be careful here, he added, because I am not going to tell you to pursue him or not pursue him. Tate glanced up again. But I am going to tell you, Andrew said, that making decisions from a place of panic, shame, or self-erasure is usually not how stable outcomes are created. Tate's fingers flexed slightly in his lap. Integrity is not the absence of impact on other people's lives, Andrew said. It's the ability to act with awareness, honesty, and responsibility within the relationships you're already in. Tate's breathing slowed slightly, but his shoulders were still tense. Andrew continued. I also want to address something, he added. Tate frowned slightly. What? Noah might have had a better life if he never met you, Andrew said. Tate looked away immediately. Andrew didn't let that pass untouched. Silence. Andrew let it sit for a moment. Then he said more firmly. That is a very important contradiction to notice. Tate's voice came out rough. So, what, I'm supposed to be grateful he ruined me or something? No, Andrew said immediately, that is not what I said. A beat. What I am saying, he continued, is that your narrative is collapsing into extremes. Either you are harmful and should disappear from his life, or you are dependent on him for survival. Tate's eyes narrowed slightly. Andrew continued. Those are not the only two options, he said. Silence again. Then Andrew shifted slightly, and when he spoke again his tone softened, less analytical, more grounding. I want you to hear me clearly, he said. I am not asking you to confess everything to Noah right now. Tate looked up cautiously. I am not asking you to sacrifice your privacy as a condition for being loved, Andrew added. A pause. But I am asking you to stop making decisions about your existence as a person based on what you assume will destroy other people. Tate swallowed. Andrew watched him closely. You are not responsible for controlling every outcome of everyone else's emotional life, he said. A beat, but you are responsible for not using your own shame as a compass. Silence settled again. This time Andrew didn't fill it. He just stayed there, present, steady, not pushing Tate toward confession, not pushing him toward disappearance, just keeping the moment from turning into another irreversible conclusion. Andrew sighed, then continued speaking. I wondered after I figured out your secret, Tate, why you never picked up the phone and called 911 during any of those years you spent with Noah. Why didn't you call the police? My fiancé, Tate said, wasn't a threat until I was 13 years old, but by then it was too late. Noah was already a fixture in the house and there was no way he would leave. I kept my secret so Noah would never be impacted by the reality of my life. I love him, Andrew. I won't tell him I can't take everything from him. I've already taken so much from him. Then you're going to lose him, Andrew clarified. Noah's getting married in June. You don't have a right, Tate, to hold part of the truth from him. Not telling someone the truth is the same as lying. You don't have to tell him anything, but you can't be with him if you don't. Anything less than the truth is not consent. If you hold back information that would impact Noah's desire to consensually be in a relationship with you, that relationship will not be consensual. You have to decide between what keeps you warmer at night, your secrets or that blonde boy you love, and honestly, Tate, if I were Noah, I would want to know. It's not right to let that boy live a lie believing it's true. Andrew nodded and explained. If you want to be in a romantic sexual relationship with the blonde boy you love, Tate, you're going to have to tell Noah why you met, why you never defined your relationship with him, why you refused to be honest about your secrets, why you opposed his adoption, and why you have all these disorders. You have to tell him because until you do, Noah will never know how much you really loved him. Your love protected Noah in ways he couldn't bear to know at that time, but he's not a child anymore, and if you don't tell him and he finds out outside of you, Tate, he'll never forgive you. Andrew didn't move for a moment. Tate's words were still in the air, heavy with shame and fear, like he was describing something contaminated rather than something he had survived. Andrew's expression softened, but not into agreement with the self-condemnation, more like steady containment. I hear you, Andrew said quietly. Tate kept his eyes down. Andrew continued, careful and precise. You've used words like disgusting and shameful in previous conversations to describe your history. A pause. I want to be very clear, I do not agree with those descriptions. Tate's jaw tightened. It feels like that. I understand that it feels that way, Andrew replied, but feeling shame is not the same as something being shameful. Silence. Tate exhaled shakily, still not looking up. Andrew shifted slightly closer, not intrusive but present, his voice lowered. You said you can't bear to tell him, he said. Tate nodded faintly. Andrew didn't challenge that directly. Instead he reframed it. Then we don't force a disclosure decision in this moment, he said. Tate's shoulders tensed slightly, as if expecting a trap. Andrew continued. But we also don't pretend that the current situation can stay unchanged indefinitely without cost. A beat. That part matters, he added. Silence. Then Tate spoke smaller now. I can't do it, he repeated. I can't carry it, I can't tell him, I can't be that person who says it out loud. Andrew watched him closely. Then, gently, he reached out, not abruptly, not possessively, and placed a steadying hand on Tate's shoulder. Not to steer him. Just to anchor him. It's all right, Andrew said. Tate blinked, confused by the shift. Andrew continued, calm and grounded. It is all right if you are not ready to be fully transparent with Noah, he said. And it is all right if that means you cannot continue the relationship in the form you want it to take. Tate's breath caught slightly at that, but Andrew didn't escalate it. He kept his tone even. What I am not going to do, Andrew added, is encourage you to stay in a relationship where you feel you must actively suppress major parts of your life to maintain it. A pause. That kind of suppression doesn't stay contained, he said. It leaks into anxiety, into behavior, into mistrust on both sides and affects Noah.